My wife texted, "Don't freak out. I lost your work laptop. My ex borrowed it for a project and now he can't find it." I replied, "No problem, I'll handle it." 2 days later, I made a few calls, filed a quick report, and waited. When her ex got a visit from the police and a $100,000 fine, he couldn't explain. She finally texted, "What did you do?" Look, I'm not the kind of guy who loses his cool easily. I work in IT security, which means my daily bread consists of managing digital disasters, calming down executives who think their emails disappeared into the void, and explaining to Karen from accounting that no, her password cannot be password123 for the 15th time. I've seen some stuff. I've dealt with server crashes at 3 in the morning, ransomware attacks that made grown men weep, and that one time Jerry from sales clicked on an email that literally said, "Definitely a virus" in the subject line. Nothing rattles me anymore. I'm basically a Zen master in a polo shirt. So, when I tell you that Wednesday afternoon started out peaceful, I mean genuinely blissfully boring in the best possible way. The kind of day where your biggest existential crisis is whether to get a burrito or a sandwich for lunch. I'd settled into my home office with a lukewarm cup of coffee that I'd reheated twice already, living the dream, and I was knee-deep in reviewing security protocols for a client presentation. The email server was being its usual temperamental self, moving at the speed of a sedated sloth. But whatever, I had time. Life was good, life was stable, life was predictable. And then my phone buzzed. Now, I should mention that my wife, Chloe, has a particular texting style. She's one of those people who sends one sentence per message. So your phone basically has a seizure with notifications. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It's like being pecked to death by a very insistent digital pigeon. But this time, it was just one message. One single solitary text that would go on to absolutely detonate my entire afternoon like a tactical nuke made of pure stupidity. "Don't freak out. I lost your work laptop. My ex borrowed it for a project and now he can't find it." I stared at my screen, blinked, read it again. Then one more time for good luck, because surely I was having a stroke, or my brain had just decided to autocorrect reality into some kind of fever dream. Don't freak out. Don't freak out. That's like a doctor starting a conversation with, "So, about your test results," and expecting you to remain chill. That's the universal phrase that guarantees immediate freaking out. It's basically a written guarantee that whatever comes next is going to be catastrophically bad. But let's skip past the obvious landmine of "don't freak out" and really examine the poetry of disaster that followed. I lost your work laptop. Okay, bad. But accidents happen, right? Maybe it fell behind the couch. Maybe it's in the car. Maybe we're still in salvageable territory here. But then comes the plot twist that would make M. Night Shyamalan slow clap. My ex borrowed it for a project, and now he can't find it. My brain straight up blue screened. You know that Windows error screen? The blue one with the sad face that says your PC ran into a problem? That was happening inside my skull. Critical error, system failure. Please restart your entire understanding of reality. Her ex, as in the previous romantic partner, the guy she dated before me, the dude who is decidedly not her husband and definitely not authorized to touch my stuff. That ex. He borrowed my company-issued, encrypted, absolutely not for casual loan work laptop for a project. Let me paint you a picture of what my work laptop contains. Proprietary client information, encrypted security protocols, NDAs that could make lawyers salivate, access credentials to systems that handle sensitive data for companies that would absolutely sue me into the Stone Age if that information got out, and approximately 17,000 emails discussing things that should never, ever see the light of day. This isn't my personal cat videos and online shopping laptop. This is the, if this falls into the wrong hands, I'm getting fired and possibly arrested laptop. And apparently, Chloe thought it was the community lending library. I sat there, phone in hand, trying to process what I just read. It was like being told, "Hey honey, don't panic, but I gave a complete stranger your social security number, credit card, and house keys. But it's cool, he seemed nice and said he needed them for a thing." That's the energy we're working with here. The rational part of my brain, the part that gets paid to solve problems calmly and efficiently, started doing the math. Her ex, David, had my laptop for a project and now couldn't find it, which meant for some indeterminate amount of time, a guy I'd never met who had exactly zero authorization or security clearance had been in possession of a device that contained enough sensitive information to potentially end my career and bankrupt several small companies. Cool, 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 cool. Totally fine, not a problem at all. I could feel my blood pressure doing things that would make my doctor prescribe meditation and possibly a mild sedative. My coffee suddenly tasted like betrayal. The peaceful Wednesday afternoon vibe had been thoroughly murdered and left in a ditch somewhere. But here's the thing about working in IT security for over a decade. You'll learn to compartmentalize. You'll learn to smile while everything's on fire. You learn to type professional emails while internally screaming into the void. It's basically a superpower, except instead of flying or super strength, you get crippling stress and the ability to look calm during catastrophic situations. So I took a deep breath. Then another one, maybe 3 more after that. I counted to 10, then 20. I considered meditation. I considered day drinking. I considered many things. And then, with the composure of a bomb disposal expert discussing lunch plans, I typed back, "No problem, I'll handle it." 4 words: calm, professional, reasonable. That was probably the most restrained, "you just absolutely detonated your own life and possibly mine too" message ever sent in the history of text communication. It deserved an award, a plaque, maybe a documentary about emotional control under extreme duress. I hit send and set my phone down very carefully, like it might explode if I moved too fast. My peaceful Wednesday afternoon was officially dead. And somewhere out there, some guy named David, who I'd never met, never wanted to meet, and now absolutely needed to meet, had my entire professional life in his, apparently very careless hands. "Don't freak out," she said. "Right, sure, no problem at all." That evening, I found myself sitting in our living room with a cup of coffee that had gone cold about 40 minutes ago, staring at absolutely nothing while my brain tried to process the sheer audacity of what had just transpired. You know that feeling when something so bizarre happens that your mind just kinda checks out for a bit? Like when you're watching a horror movie and the protagonist does something so monumentally stupid that you have to pause and reconsider your faith in humanity. Yeah, that was me. Except I was living it, not watching it, which somehow made it infinitely worse. The really surreal part? Chloe was in the kitchen humming. Actually humming, like we lived in some kind of sitcom where catastrophic lapses in judgment were just adorable quirks that got resolved in 22 minutes with a laugh track. She was chopping vegetables for dinner, probably planning some nice meal, acting like she hadn't just casually mentioned that my entire career was currently in the possession of her ex-boyfriend like it was a borrowed cup of sugar. I could hear her moving around, opening cabinets, running water, doing all those normal evening routine things that people do when their day hasn't included committing potential corporate espionage by proxy. Meanwhile, I was sitting there having what I can only describe as an out-of-body experience, watching my life potentially circle the drain in slow motion. When she finally emerged from the kitchen with that everything's fine smile that people use when everything is decidedly not fine, I decided it was time for some answers. You know, basic stuff like, when exactly did she think loaning out classified equipment to random dudes was acceptable behavior? So I said, keeping my voice impressively level, considering my internal monologue was mostly screaming, walk me through this. When exactly did David need to borrow my work laptop? She sat down across from me, still with that infuriatingly casual energy, and launched into an explanation that made about as much sense as a screen door on a submarine. Apparently, David, this mythical ex-boyfriend who I'd heard about maybe twice in passing and had never actually met, needed a laptop for a presentation. His presentation for his work. Which, okay, adults have presentations, that's normal. But here's where the logic takes a hard left turn into crazy town. Her laptop was glitching. Glitching, that's the official technical term she used. Not broken, not dead, not stolen by raccoons, glitching, which in normal human language usually means I haven't updated it in 6 months and now it's mad at me, or I have 47 browser tabs open and it's staging a rebellion. Nothing that couldn't be solved with, oh, I don't know, a simple restart, or maybe using one of the 17,000 free Google Docs accounts that exist in the universe. But instead of literally any other solution that a functional adult might consider, borrowing a friend's laptop, using a library computer, renting one, buying a cheap one, using a freaking tablet, she decided that my company-issued, encrypted, absolutely not for civilian use work device was the obvious choice. Like it was communal property, like we lived in some kind of socialist laptop sharing collective where personal and professional boundaries were just adorable suggestions. So, you gave him my work laptop? I said slowly, like I was explaining quantum physics to a golden retriever, because yours was glitching? It made sense at the time, she said with a shrug that physically hurt to witness. He really needed it, and you weren't using it that day. I wasn't using it that day? That day? Singular? As if the laptop's purpose was determined by my immediate moment-to-moment need for it, rather than, being a repository for sensitive corporate data that existed regardless of whether I was actively typing on it. Okay, I said, taking a sip of my cold coffee because I needed something to do with my hands that wasn't strangling the air. When did you give it to him? Like 5 days ago? 5 days ago. I had to set my coffee down before I dropped it. 5 days. Not 5 hours, not earlier today. 5 entire days had passed where my work laptop, containing encrypted projects, client contracts, security protocols, access credentials, and enough NDA material to make every lawyer in a 50-mile radius spontaneously materialize with lawsuits, had been in the possession of David the X. For almost a full business week, some dude I'd never met had unrestricted access to information that could tank multiple companies and my career and potentially land me in legal hot water so deep I'd need scuba gear. And during this time, Chloe had just, forgotten to mention it? Didn't think it was worth a heads up? Was waiting for the right moment to casually drop this bomb? Like, oh, by the way, honey, I committed potential corporate espionage. What's for dinner? 5 days, I repeated, mostly to myself, trying to wrap my head around the timeline. My laptop has been missing for 5 days, and you're just now telling me? I didn't think it was a big deal, she said. And I swear to God, that sentence almost made my eye twitch. David's responsible. He said he'd take care of it. David's responsible. David, who had now lost said laptop, was apparently the poster child for responsibility in Chloe's universe. The same David who couldn't manage to return a borrowed item within a reasonable time frame? That David? Very responsible. Much trust. Wow. I could feel my IT security training kicking in, that part of my brain that deals with damage control and crisis management. 5 days was an eternity in tech terms. That was 120 hours, 7,200 minutes. Plenty of time for data to be copied, passwords to be cracked if someone knew what they were doing, information to be compromised in ways that would make my company's legal team develop stress ulcers. But I didn't shout. I didn't throw things. Even though the decorative bowl on the coffee table was looking increasingly throwable, I didn't launch into a lecture about professional boundaries, data security, or basic common sense. Instead, I just sat there, processing the magnitude of the situation, while my wife looked at me like I was being dramatic about the whole thing. "Okay," I finally said in that same tone that surgeons probably use right before they have to amputate something that's gone septic. Calm, clinical, detached. "Okay." That one word contained multitudes. It contained my dying faith in this relationship. It contained my dawning realization that I'd married someone who thought corporate espionage was just a fun Wednesday activity. It contained my plan to fix this situation, which was already forming in the back of my mind like a strategic military operation. Chloe went back to the kitchen, apparently satisfied that the conversation was over and everything was resolved. I could hear her humming again. Actually humming, like we just discussed what movie to watch, not the potential implosion of my entire professional life. I sat there with my cold coffee, staring at nothing, and thought about all the decisions that had led me to this exact moment. Every choice, every turn, every step that had resulted in me sitting in my living room while my career hung in the balance because my wife thought laptop lending was a casual, no big deal kind of thing. And somewhere out there, David the X was probably living his best life, completely unaware that he was holding a digital bomb that could explode at any moment. 5 days. 5 whole days. I finished my cold coffee and started planning. Here's something most people don't know about IT security professionals. We're basically professional paranoids who get paid to turn our anxiety into a marketable skill. While normal people are out there living their lives, trusting that their devices are safe and their data is secure, we're the ones lying awake at 3 in the morning thinking about all the ways everything could go catastrophically wrong. And because we're paranoid, we prepare. We install tracking systems. We set up redundancies. We build digital safety nets for the inevitable moment when someone does something monumentally stupid, like, say, loaning out a work laptop to their ex-boyfriend. The second Chloe went to bed that night, still humming, still acting like the world wasn't on fire, I retreated to my home office and fired up my tracking system. Every IT security guy worth their salt has one. It's like Find My iPhone, except built by someone who assumes everyone is out to get them and plans accordingly. We're talking military-grade paranoia translated into software. I logged in, my fingers moving across the keyboard with the kind of muscle memory that comes from years of late-night crisis management. The interface loaded, and I held my breath. Please have a signal. Please have a signal. Please don't tell me this idiot removed the tracking software or, God forbid, wiped the entire system. And there it was, a ping, a beautiful, blessed ping that meant my laptop was still out there, still trackable, still sending out its little digital breadcrumbs for me to follow. I could have cried. Actually, I might have let out a small, slightly unhinged laugh that would have concerned anyone who heard it. Last signal, Saturday, 4:12 p.m. I stared at the timestamp. Saturday? That was 4 days ago, which meant for 4 entire days, my laptop had been sitting somewhere dormant, probably turned off or maybe just out of range. But before that, before it went dark, it had been pinging away, telling me exactly where it was. And I'd had no idea because nobody had bothered to mention that it was missing. The location data loaded, and I leaned forward, squinting at the map marker like it held the secrets to the universe. The pin dropped on a high-end apartment complex across town. Not just any apartment complex, mind you. This was one of those places with a name like The Residences at Pretentious Heights or Luxury Living for People with More Money Than Sense. The kind of building with a doorman, a gym that nobody uses, and probably a rooftop pool where people took Instagram photos but never actually swam. So, David the X apparently wasn't living in some studio apartment eating ramen and crying about his failed relationship. Nope. He was posted up in luxury accommodations, living his best life, while apparently being too cheap or too stupid to buy his own damn laptop for his very important presentation. I took screenshots, multiple screenshots, different angles of the map, close-ups of the address, wide shots showing the surrounding area. I geotagged everything, downloaded the raw data, and saved it all in 3 different locations, because that's what you do when you're building a case. And yes, I was already thinking of this as a case. This wasn't just, oops, lost item. This was rapidly becoming Exhibit A in the trial of David versus basic human decency. The data showed the laptop had been at that location consistently for days before going silent, which meant David had been using it, actually using my work laptop, probably logging into God knows what, clicking on files, maybe even trying to access secured information. The thought made my skin crawl. It was like finding out a stranger had been living in your house, sleeping in your bed, eating your food, and you'd just been completely oblivious the whole time. I compiled everything into a neat folder labeled Laptop Recovery Evidence because I'm nothing if not organized, even when I'm spiraling into justified rage. Then I sat back and stared at my screen, feeling that particular mixture of vindication and fury that comes from being absolutely right about something terrible. This is when I decided to call my buddy, Mark. Mark's a cop. Well, technically he's a detective, but he hates when people make a big deal about the title. We'd met years ago at some community thing, bonded over our shared appreciation for terrible action movies and good whiskey, and had stayed friends ever since. He told me once, after his 3rd bourbon, "Man, you track stuff better than half our detectives. You ever get tired of the corporate gig? You'd make a killing in law enforcement." At the time, I'd laughed it off. Now I was about to put those skills to use. I pulled up his contact and hit call. It rang twice before his familiar voice answered, sounding slightly amused already. "This better be good. It's almost midnight." "I need to ask you something hypothetical," I said, which is how every non-hypothetical conversation starts. "Oh boy," Mark said, and I could hear him settling in, probably grabbing a beer because he knew this was going to be a story. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything. My wife's ex borrowed my work laptop and now can't find it. Hypothetically speaking, what's the process if someone refuses to return company property?" There was a pause. Then Mark started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but a full-on belly laugh that lasted about 15 seconds too long for my ego. "Oh, man. Oh, buddy, are you serious right now?" "Dead serious." Okay, he said, getting himself together. "So, hypothetically, and I'm using that word loosely here because we both know this is extremely specific, if someone has possession of company property and refuses to return it, that starts entering theft territory, especially if it's high-value equipment. Define high value. Anything over 10 grand. And if it contains sensitive data, trade secrets, client information, anything that could constitute a corporate security breach, then you're looking at potential corporate theft charges. That's not a slap on the wrist. That's actual criminal charges. I felt something warm bloom in my chest. Hope, maybe? Or possibly vindication. Hard to tell. Even if my wife's ex borrowed it? Especially then, Mark said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. There's no legitimate reason for a random civilian to have access to protected company equipment. That's not borrowing, that's unauthorized possession of secured property. If he refuses to return it or can't return it, that's when things get legally interesting. Legally interesting. I love that phrase. It sounded so much better than your wife might have accidentally made you an accomplice to corporate espionage. What's the laptop worth? Mark asked. The device itself, around $12,000. The data on it, probably worth millions if you count the projects, client information, and security protocols. Mark whistled low. Yeah, that's felony territory, my friend. If you need to file a report, do it sooner rather than later. Creates a paper trail, shows you took immediate action, covers your ass with your company. We talked for another few minutes, with Mark giving me the rundown on how to properly document everything, what information I'd need for a police report, and how to frame it so that it didn't look like a domestic dispute, but an actual theft case. He was in full detective mode, and I was taking mental notes like my life depended on it, because it kinda did. When I finally hung up, I felt like I'd just been given a roadmap out of hell. I had the location, I had the evidence, I had the legal framework, and most importantly, I had a plan. I pulled up a new document and started typing out a timeline of events. Every detail, every conversation, every piece of data. When Chloe had given David the laptop, when she told me about it, when I discovered the location, what the laptop contained, its value, everything. Organized and documented like I was preparing for trial. Because honestly, at this point, I might be. The clock on my computer read 1:47 a.m. I should have been tired. Instead, I felt more awake than I had in days. Nothing clears the mind quite like righteous anger and a solid action plan. I saved the document, backed it up, encrypted it for good measure, and finally allowed myself a small smile. Game on, David. The next morning, after approximately 4 hours of sleep that could generously be described as restless anxiety napping, I decided it was time to reach out to David directly. You know, give the guy a chance, extend an olive branch, be the bigger person. All those things that people do right before they absolutely destroy someone's life with facts and legal documentation. I crafted my text message with the care of a poet writing their magnum opus. Except, instead of flowery language and metaphors, I was aiming for professionally cordial while internally screaming. It's a delicate balance. Too friendly and you look like a pushover. Too aggressive and you tip your hand. I needed to hit that sweet spot of reasonable adult making a simple request while documenting everything for the inevitable legal proceedings. Here's what I sent. Hey, this is Chloe's husband. You borrowed my work laptop last week. I need it back by tomorrow. I can pick it up. Short, simple, direct. No accusations, no threats, no emotion. Just the facts presented in the most neutral possible way. I even offered to pick it up myself, which I thought was pretty generous considering this whole situation existed because of his inability to manage borrowed property like a functional adult. I hit send, and then did what every person does after sending an important text. I immediately second-guessed everything about it. Should I have been friendlier? Should I have explained why I needed it urgently? Should I have added an emoji to seem less threatening? No, wait, definitely no emoji. Nothing says I'm serious about getting my property back quite like a smiley face, right? Then I waited, and waited, and waited some more. You know that special kind of frustration that comes from watching 3 dots appear and disappear on a text message? Except the 3 dots never even showed up. That's what I was experiencing. Radio silence. Complete and total nothing. It was like I'd sent my message into the void, and the void had shrugged and gone back to scrolling TikTok. Hours passed. I checked my phone approximately every 4 minutes, which I realize sounds obsessive. But let me tell you, when your entire career is potentially hanging in the balance, you become very interested in your text message notifications. Every buzz made my heart jump, and every time it was just some spam email or a notification from an app I'd forgotten I downloaded, I died a little inside. Chloe noticed, of course. She noticed me glancing at my phone during breakfast. She noticed me checking it while I was supposed to be working. She noticed me staring at the screen like it might spontaneously generate a response through sheer force of will. "Did you text David?" she asked around lunchtime, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer and wasn't thrilled about it. "Yeah," I said, keeping my eyes on my laptop screen, because looking at her might trigger a conversation I wasn't ready to have. Asked him to return my laptop. Basic property recovery stuff. She sighed. One of those long, dramatic sighs that women deploy when they think you're being unreasonable about something that is actually extremely reasonable. "He's probably busy. He has a demanding job, right?" A demanding job? So demanding that he needed to borrow someone else's work equipment because he apparently couldn't manage to acquire his own? So demanding that he couldn't take 30 seconds to respond to a simple text message. Must be really tough being that busy. "I'm sure he'll respond when he gets a chance," she continued, now in full peacemaker mode, like she was mediating a dispute between two equally unreasonable parties, instead of a guy trying to get his stolen property back from her irresponsible ex. I nodded, said nothing, and went back to my laptop. No point in arguing. She was going to defend him regardless, and I was going to do what needed to be done regardless. We were on parallel tracks heading in completely different directions. And honestly, I was okay with that. By late afternoon, still nothing. Not a single word. Not even a, "Hey, saw your message, let me get back to you." Nothing. Complete ghosting. Which, in my professional opinion, was a terrible strategy. If someone asks for their property back and you ignore them, you're essentially admitting that you either can't or won't return it, which is legally very interesting territory. Dinner that evening was what I can only describe as aggressively awkward. Chloe had made pasta with marinara sauce and those pre-made meatballs that come frozen, because neither of us were exactly culinary geniuses, and we sat across from each other eating in the kind of loaded silence that makes you hyper-aware of every chewing sound. I ate my pasta like it was an alibi. You know what I mean? Like every bite was evidence of my normalcy, my calm demeanor, my absolute lack of internal screaming. Just a guy eating pasta, definitely not planning the systematic documentation and legal pursuit of his wife's ex-boyfriend. Normal Thursday night dinner. Nothing to see here. Chloe kept trying to make conversation, asking about my day, mentioning something about her coworker's drama, talking about maybe repainting the bathroom. All surface-level stuff, designed to pretend everything was fine and we weren't sitting in the wreckage of what used to be a functional marriage. Finally, she put down her fork and hit me with the line I'd been waiting for. "You're taking this too seriously." I looked up from my pasta, which I'd been pushing around my plate in increasingly aggressive circles. Taking what too seriously? "The laptop thing. It's not that big a deal. David will find it or get you a new one. You're acting like it's the end of the world." There it was. The fundamental disconnect between us laid out in one casual statement. To her, this was a minor inconvenience, a small hiccup, maybe even something to laugh about later. To me, this was potential career suicide, legal liability, corporate security breach, and the horrifying realization that my wife had the risk assessment skills of a lemming. "Right," I said, setting down my fork with more force than necessary. It made a little clinking sound against the plate that seemed way too loud in the quiet kitchen. Losing a corporate-issued encrypted device containing sensitive client data worth potentially millions of dollars is totally chill? You're right, I'm being dramatic. Next week, maybe we can lose the car for fun. Or, hey, how about we loan out my social security number to strangers? That sounds like a good time. Her face did that thing where it goes from concerned to annoyed in about 2 seconds flat. "Now you're just being ridiculous." Am I, though? Am I really? I stood up, picking up my plate even though I'd only eaten about half my pasta. Because from where I'm sitting, I asked for my property back, property that should never have been loaned out in the first place, and I'm being treated like I'm the unreasonable one for wanting it returned. David's not a stranger. He's a good person going through a tough time, and you're treating him like he's some kind of criminal. I paused at the sink, plate in hand, and turned back to her. He's had my laptop for almost a week, ignored my text asking for it back, and apparently can't even be bothered to respond. What exactly about that screams good person to you? She didn't have an answer for that. Instead, she did what people do when they don't have a logical argument. She got defensive. You know what? Fine. Handle it however you want, but don't expect me to be okay with you harassing my friend. Friend, not ex-boyfriend anymore. Friend. The linguistic gymnastics were almost impressive. I finished loading the dishwasher in silence, while Chloe retreated to the living room to watch TV at a volume that was definitely louder than necessary. The sound of some reality show filtered through the walls. People yelling at each other about something meaningless, completely oblivious to actual problems. I pulled out my phone one more time, checking for a response I knew wasn't coming. Still nothing. Still completely ignored. Still being treated like my property rights were negotiable. That's when I made my decision. I'd given him a chance. I'd been reasonable. I'd been patient. I'd followed the proper social protocols of asking nicely and waiting for a response. And I'd got nothing. Well, if David wanted to play the ignore and hope it goes away game, he was about to learn that I was exceptionally good at the document and escalate game. I opened my notes app and started a new entry. Text sent to David at 9:47 a.m. Thursday. No response received as of 8:30 p.m. Thursday. Gave 24-hour window for voluntary return. Subject chose not to respond. Time to move to Plan B. And Plan B involved a lot more paperwork and a lot less niceness. By Friday morning, I'd officially heard nothing. Zero. Zilch. Nada. The sound of absolute silence from David was deafening and honestly kind of impressive in its consistency. Most people, when asked to return borrowed property, will at least acknowledge the request. Maybe say, yeah, give me a few days, or I'm looking for it, or even, sorry, can't find it. But complete radio silence? That takes a special kind of commitment to being terrible. So, I did what any reasonable person would do when someone steals their stuff and ghosts them. I got dressed in my most professional-looking button-down shirt, grabbed my folder of meticulously organized evidence, and headed down to the local police station like I was about to file the world's most satisfying paperwork. The police station was exactly what you'd expect. Fluorescent lighting that made everyone look vaguely deceased. Chairs that had seen better days circa 1987, and that distinct smell of old coffee mixed with industrial cleaning solution and crushed dreams. A few people were scattered around the waiting area, all looking like they'd rather be literally anywhere else. I checked in at the front desk, explained I needed to file a theft report, and was told to take a seat. I sat down and waited, watching a wall clock tick away with the enthusiasm of someone being forced to exist. Every second felt like a small victory. Every minute that passed was another minute of documentation that David had failed to return my property. I was building a timeline, a narrative, a legal fortress of this guy absolutely screwed up, and here's the receipts. After about 20 minutes, a detective called my name. Detective Ramos, according to his badge. He looked like he'd been doing this job for about 15 years too long. That perfect combination of tired and cynical that comes from seeing humanity at its worst on a daily basis. He was holding a styrofoam cup of coffee that looked like it had been brewed sometime during the Reagan administration and had been slowly evolving into sentient sludge ever since. "Come on back," he said, leading me to a desk that was covered in file folders, sticky notes, and what I'm pretty sure was a sandwich from earlier in the week. He gestured to a chair that wobbled when I sat down, then settled himself across from me, taking a long sip of his terrible coffee like it was fine wine. "So, you're here to report a theft?" "Yes, sir," I said, pulling out my folder with the kind of organization that probably made me look either extremely prepared or slightly unhinged. My work laptop was taken without authorization, and the person who has it is refusing to return it. Detective Ramos pulled out a form and clicked his pen. One of those cheap ballpoint pens that somehow always end up in police stations and doctors' offices. All right, let's start with the basics. When was the laptop taken? Last Saturday. My wife loaned it to her ex-boyfriend without my knowledge or permission for what she described as a project. I watched his eyebrow raise slightly at that. Yeah, buddy, it gets better. I didn't find out it was missing until Wednesday. I reached out yesterday asking for its return and have received no response. He was writing this down, nodding occasionally. And this is a personal laptop or work-issued? Work-issued. Company property. I'm an IT security specialist, so the laptop contains encrypted client data, security protocols, and proprietary information covered under multiple NDAs. That made him look up. I could see the gears turning in his head, upgrading this from domestic drama over a laptop to, oh, this might actually be interesting. What's the value of the device? The laptop itself is roughly $12,000. It's a high-spec machine required for my work, but the data on it, client projects, security credentials, confidential business information, that's worth considerably more. Millions, if you want to get technical about potential damages. Detective Ramos set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, which squeaked in protest. Okay, so we're not talking about a personal MacBook here. Definitely not. We're talking about secured corporate equipment that's now been in the possession of an unauthorized civilian for almost a week. He picked up his coffee, took another sip, and made a face that suggested even he couldn't pretend it tasted good anymore. Do you have any documentation, communications with this individual, tracking information, anything like that? I opened my folder like I was presenting evidence in a courtroom. I have the text message I sent requesting its return, which was ignored. I have tracking data showing the laptop's last known location at his apartment complex on Saturday at 4:12 p.m. I have documentation of the laptop's value and serial number. I have my company's equipment policy stating that I'm liable for unauthorized access or loss, and I have a timeline of events. I spread it all out on his desk. Screenshots, printed maps, text message logs, everything organized with tabs and highlights, like I was trying to win a prize for most prepared theft victim. Detective Ramos looked at the spread of evidence, then back at me, then back at the evidence. Did you work in law enforcement before? No, sir. I just really don't like when people steal my stuff. He actually smiled at that. First genuine emotion I'd seen from him. Fair enough. This is actually really helpful. Most people come in here with nothing but anger and expectations. You've done half my job for me. I shrugged. I document things for a living. Seemed appropriate to apply those skills here. The laptop itself is roughly $12,000. It's a high-spec machine required for my work, but the data on it, client projects, security credentials, confidential business information, that's worth considerably more. Millions, if you want to get technical about potential damages. Detective Ramos set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, which squeaked in protest. Okay, so we're not talking about a personal MacBook here. Definitely not. We're talking about secured corporate equipment that's now been in the possession of an unauthorized civilian for almost a week. He picked up his coffee, took another sip, and made a face that suggested even he couldn't pretend it tasted good anymore. Do you have any documentation, communications with this individual, tracking information, anything like that? I opened my folder like I was presenting evidence in a courtroom. I have the text message I sent requesting its return, which was ignored. I have tracking data showing the laptop's last known location at his apartment complex on Saturday at 4:12 p.m. I have documentation of the laptop's value and serial number. I have my company's equipment policy stating that I'm liable for unauthorized access or loss. And I have a timeline of events. I spread it all out on his desk. Screenshots, printed maps, text message logs, everything organized with tabs and highlights like I was trying to win a prize for most prepared theft victim. Detective Ramos looked at the spread of evidence, then back at me, then back at the evidence. Did you work in law enforcement before? No, sir. I just really don't like when people steal my stuff. He actually smiled at that. First genuine emotion I'd seen from him. Fair enough. This is actually really helpful. Most people come in here with nothing but anger and expectations. You've done half my job for me. I shrugged. I document things for a living. Seemed appropriate to apply those skills here. He started typing on his computer, occasionally referring to my printouts, asking clarifying questions about dates and times and values. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the hunt and peck method that drove me crazy to watch. But whatever, he was filing my report, and that's all that mattered. So, just to clarify, he said, still typing, this David Wilson, he'd gotten the name from my documentation, has had unauthorized possession of a $12,000 encrypted corporate device containing sensitive data for approximately 6 days, has been asked to return it, and has refused to respond. That's correct. And your wife gave it to him without your permission or knowledge. Also correct. Though in her defense, I don't think she understood what she was actually handing over. She thought it was just a laptop, not a mobile repository of corporate secrets and legal liability. Detective Ramos stopped typing and looked at me. Is that you defending her or throwing her under the bus? Yes, I said. He snorted, which I chose to take as a sign that we were bonding. Okay, here's the thing. Based on what you're telling me and what you've documented, this isn't just a civil matter. The value of the device alone puts it in grand theft territory. Add in the corporate data and potential for data breach, and we're looking at possible criminal charges. Music to my ears. Beautiful, legal, consequence-filled music. The data breach angle is what concerns my company most, I said, which was true. I'd sent a heads up to my boss earlier that morning, carefully worded to cover my ass while explaining the situation. His response had been a string of curse words followed by, "Handle it and keep me updated." Very supportive. I'm going to file this as theft of property over $10,000 plus potential corporate espionage or data breach. That should get his attention. Detective Ramos printed out a form, had me sign it, and handed me a case number. We'll contact Mr. Wilson and inform him that he needs to return the property immediately or face criminal charges. If he has any brains at all, he'll return it. And if he doesn't, then we pay him a visit and things get official. Warrants, seizures, the fun stuff. He finished his terrible coffee and tossed the cup in a trash can that was already overflowing. You did good bringing this in when you did. Created a paper trail. Showed good faith effort to resolve it peacefully. Protects you legally. I stood up, gathering my folder. That was the idea.
Your wife know you're doing this? Not yet. Figured I'd let reality deliver that message for me. Detective Ramos actually laughed at that. Oh man, you're either brave or stupid. Little bit of both, probably. He walked me back out to the lobby, shook my hand, and promised to keep me updated. I walked out of that police station feeling lighter than I had in days. The weight of uncertainty was gone, replaced by the solid foundation of official documentation and legal process. I got in my car, sat in the driver's seat, and just breathed for a minute. The morning sun was bright. The coffee from the shop next door smelled amazing through my cracked window. And somewhere across town, David the X had no idea that his life was about to get very complicated. I pulled out of the parking lot and actually found myself humming. Not because I'm vindictive. Okay, maybe a little vindictive. But because I'd done everything right. Asked nicely, documented everything, followed proper channels, given chances. And now the system would do what it does best, make people regret their bad decisions. I stopped at that coffee shop, ordered something that actually tasted good, and drove home feeling like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to work out fine. Well, fine for me anyway. David was probably going to have a rough weekend. Saturday morning rolled around with the kind of mundane normalcy that makes you forget your life is currently a dumpster fire. I needed groceries. We were out of basically everything, except condiments and that weird can of chickpeas that had been sitting in the pantry since we moved in. So I headed to the supermarket like a functional adult doing functional adult things. There's something weirdly therapeutic about grocery shopping when your personal life is imploding. The fluorescent lights, the music playing overhead, the endless aisles of products, all organized into neat little categories, everything in its place, everything labeled, everything making sense. Unlike, say, my marriage or my wife's decision-making skills. I was standing in the produce section, having an internal debate about apples versus oranges, riveting stuff, truly, when my phone rang. Unknown number, but local area code. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail because who actually answers unknown numbers anymore except people who enjoy talking to scammers about their car's extended warranty. But something made me answer.
Hello? Mr. Hayes? This is Detective Ramos. I straightened up so fast I almost dropped the apple I'd been examining. A woman next to me gave me a weird look. I ignored her. Detective, hi, what's going on? Got an update for you on your case. You got a minute? Did I have a minute? I had all the minutes. I had an entire afternoon of minutes. Absolutely. I pushed my cart to the side of the aisle where I wouldn't be blocking traffic, and probably looked like a lunatic standing there with an apple in one hand and my phone pressed to my ear with an expression of intense focus. So, we visited Mr. Wilson's apartment this morning, Detective Ramos said, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. He wasn't home, left a notice on his door, tried calling the number we had on file, no answer. Standard stuff when someone's avoiding us. My heart sank a little. Of course David wasn't home. Of course he was dodging this. So what happens now? Well, here's where it gets interesting. While we were running his information for the report, his name flagged in our system. Turns out, Mr. Wilson is currently under investigation by the IRS for tax fraud. I blinked, stood there in the produce section holding an apple like an idiot, processing what I just heard. I'm sorry, what? Tax fraud. Been an ongoing investigation for about 6 months. And here's the kicker. Your theft report just connected him to another case we've been working. Apparently, he's been involved in some corporate data theft schemes, selling proprietary information to competitors. The supermarket suddenly felt very far away. The music faded into background noise. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter. You're telling me that the guy who has my laptop full of corporate data, is actively under investigation for stealing and selling corporate data? That's exactly what I'm telling you. Your report basically gift-wrapped a new angle for the investigation team. They're thrilled, by the way. You just made their case a lot stronger. I had to lean against my shopping cart for support. This was beyond anything I'd imagined. I thought we were dealing with an irresponsible ex-boyfriend who lost a laptop. Turns out we were dealing with an actual criminal who specifically targeted corporate data. So what does this mean for my laptop? Means we're escalating this hard. The IRS is involved now, and they don't mess around. We're getting a warrant to search his apartment and seize any electronic devices. Your laptop is officially evidence in a federal investigation, so you're not getting it back anytime soon. Not immediately, no. But trust me, this is better. Once we recover it, forensics will go through everything, document what he accessed, whether he copied anything. If there's been any data breach, we'll know, and he'll be charged accordingly. I stood there processing this information while an elderly woman reached past me for bananas, completely oblivious to the fact that my brain was currently exploding. Detective Ramos, when you say tax fraud and corporate espionage, what kind of numbers are we talking about? The investigation values his activities at around $100,000 in damages, maybe more. Your laptop might add to that total depending on what forensics finds. Also, expect some fireworks. The IRS joined the party, and they're already moving to freeze his accounts. I couldn't help it. I started laughing. Right there in the produce section, holding an apple, I just lost it. The woman who'd been reaching for bananas edged away from me like I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was, but it was the good kind of breakdown. The kind where you realize that karma isn't just a concept, but an actual functioning force in the universe. Mr. Hayes, you okay? Yeah, I managed, getting myself together. Yeah, I'm good. This is just I filed a simple theft report because I wanted my laptop back, and now I've apparently helped bust a federal case. Pretty much. You did good work with your documentation. Made our job easy. I could hear the smile in his voice. I'll keep you updated as things progress. Might take a few weeks, but we'll get your property back eventually. Did you seriously call the police on him? Oh, there it was. Reality had apparently sent her that memo I'd been waiting for. I closed the fridge door calmly, turned to face her, and leaned back against the counter with my arms crossed. Technically, I filed a theft report on my stolen laptop. Law enforcement did the rest. Don't give me that technicality bullshit. She was practically vibrating with rage, pacing back and forth in our kitchen like a caged animal. David just called me freaking out. The police showed up at his apartment. They left a notice on his door. His accounts are being frozen. What the hell did you do? I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. This was not the time for smiling. This was the time for maintaining that calm, reasonable demeanor that makes angry people even angrier because they can't get a rise out of you. I reported that my $12,000 work laptop containing sensitive corporate data was taken without my permission, and the person who had it refused to return it. That's what I did. He didn't refuse, he just didn't respond right away. He's been busy. Right, so busy that he couldn't take 30 seconds to text back, "Hey, looking for it," or "I'll get it to you soon." So busy that my property has been missing for over a week. That kind of busy. She stopped pacing and jabbed a finger at me. You went behind my back. You didn't even tell me you were going to do this. You went behind my back and loaned out my work equipment to your ex-boyfriend, so I guess we're both full of surprises. That's different. How? Explain to me how that's different. Use small words so my apparently inferior brain can understand. She made a frustrated noise that was somewhere between a growl and a scream. Because I was trying to help a friend. You're trying to ruin his life. And there was that word again. Friend. We'd upgraded from ex-boyfriend to friend, and now, apparently, I was the villain for wanting my stolen property back. The mental gymnastics were Olympic level. "Chloe," I said, trying to inject some reason into this absolute circus of a conversation, "he's being questioned because the police discovered he's already under investigation for tax fraud and corporate data theft. I didn't ruin his life. He ruined his own life by being a criminal. I just wanted my laptop back." Her face went from red to almost purple. "He's being questioned. His accounts are frozen." Apparently, yes. Turns out when you're already under investigation for federal crimes and someone reports you for theft, law enforcement takes it seriously. Who knew? "This is insane. You're insane. He's a good person going through a hard time." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Actually laughed right in her face, which I immediately knew was a mistake. But sometimes your body just does things before your brain can stop it. A good person, Chloe? He's under investigation for tax fraud and selling corporate secrets. The IRS froze his accounts. Those things don't happen to good people going through hard times. They happen to criminals. You don't know that. The investigation could be a mistake. Yeah, because the IRS is famous for freezing people's accounts based on hunches and vibes. Come on. She was full-on yelling now, and honestly, I was impressed with her lung capacity. "He's losing everything, his apartment, his savings, everything, and it's your fault." "No," I said, my own voice rising now, because there's only so much blame I can take for someone else's criminal activity. It's his fault for being a thief and a fraud. I filed a report about my stolen property. The fact that it opened up a bigger investigation isn't my problem. That's his problem. That's what happens when you build your life on illegal activities. Eventually, it catches up with you. You could have just asked him nicely. I did ask him nicely. I sent a perfectly polite text asking for my laptop back. He ignored it. What was I supposed to do? Send him a fruit basket and hope he felt generous? She grabbed a decorative bowl from the counter, the same one I'd considered throwing earlier in the week, which felt like poetic justice, and slammed it back down. It didn't break, but the sound was satisfying in a concerning way. "You're heartless! You don't care about anyone but yourself!" "I'm heartless? I'm heartless?" I was fully yelling now too, and some distant part of my brain noted that the neighbors were definitely hearing this and probably taking notes for their own entertainment. "You gave away my work laptop to your ex-boyfriend without asking, put my entire career at risk, and somehow I'm the bad guy for using legal channels to get it back?"
He needed help. He needed to buy his own damn laptop or rent one or use literally any other option that didn't involve stealing mine. It wasn't stealing. I gave him permission. You don't have permission to give. It's not your laptop. It's company property that I'm responsible for. We were both screaming now, faces red, probably looking absolutely unhinged to anyone who might have had the misfortune of walking past our house at that moment. This was it. This was the final boss fight of our marriage, and we were both going for the throat. "I can't believe I married someone so cold," she said, and her voice had gone quiet now, which was somehow worse than the yelling. Quiet meant she was done fighting. Quiet meant decisions were being made. So calculating, so willing to destroy someone's life over a laptop. "It's not about the laptop," I said, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded now too, like we'd both burned through our rage reserves and were running on empty. "It's about the principle. It's about boundaries. It's about the fact that you thought it was okay to make decisions about my property, my career, my life without even consulting me. And then when it all went sideways, you blamed me for it." "I hope you're happy," she said, and there were tears now, though whether they were from anger or sadness, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. "He's losing everything. Then maybe he'll learn to borrow responsibly. And maybe you'll learn that actions have consequences." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see something breaking behind her eyes. Not her spirit, her illusion. The illusion that this was fixable, that we were fixable, that any of this could be walked back or smoothed over with time and apologies. "I can't do this," she said finally. "I can't be with someone who would do this." "Funny," I said. "I was just thinking the same thing about someone who would do what you did." She grabbed her purse from the counter, her keys from the hook by the door. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a few days. Don't call me." "Wouldn't dream of it." She left. The door didn't slam this time. She closed it with deliberate care, which somehow felt more final than any amount of dramatic exit could have been. I heard her car start, heard her drive away, and then the house was silent. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of our argument and our marriage, and felt nothing. Not relief, not sadness, just a kind of empty calm, like a storm had passed and left everything flat and quiet in its wake. Then I remembered the champagne in the fridge. I opened it, poured myself a glass, and took it to the living room, sat on the couch in the too quiet house, and took a sip. At least I didn't lose David's laptop. 2 days passed in a weird kind of limbo where I existed in my house like a ghost haunting his own life. Chloe was still at her sister's place, presumably being told what a monster I was and how I'd ruined poor David's life over a silly laptop. My phone stayed blissfully silent. No angry texts, no attempted reconciliations, just blessed peace and quiet. I ordered takeout, caught up on work, and generally enjoyed the kind of solitude that comes from not having to explain yourself to anyone. Then Tuesday afternoon rolled around, and Detective Ramos called again. I was in the middle of a Zoom meeting, nodding along while someone from accounting explained quarterly projections in the most monotone voice imaginable when my phone lit up with his number. I immediately muted myself and stepped away from my desk, leaving my camera on so it looked like I was still paying attention. Priorities.
"Detective," I answered, walking into the kitchen for privacy, "please tell me you have good news." "Oh, I've got news." "All right, you sitting down?" I pulled out a kitchen chair. "I am now."
We executed the warrant yesterday. Got into Mr. Wilson's apartment with a full cybercrime unit. He paused for dramatic effect, and I had to give him credit. He knew how to work an audience. Found your laptop. Hidden in his closet, wrapped in a towel, stuffed behind some boxes. He was definitely trying to keep it hidden. Relief flooded through me so fast I actually felt lightheaded. It's intact? Nothing damaged? Physically, it's fine. But here's where things get really interesting. I could hear him shuffling papers again, that familiar background noise of a busy police station. Along with your laptop, we found multiple external hard drives. We're talking 6, maybe 7 high-capacity drives, all loaded with stolen marketing data, product designs, financial projections, corporate secrets from at least 3 different companies. I sat there processing that information, my brain trying to calculate just how spectacularly David had screwed himself. So he's not just a guy who borrowed a laptop and lost it. Not even close. This guy's been running a full-scale corporate espionage operation. He gets close to people who work for tech companies, borrows their equipment, copies everything he can access, then sells it to competitors. Your wife's laptop, your laptop, was just his latest target. The word target hit different. This wasn't a favor gone wrong. This was premeditated, calculated. He'd specifically chosen to get close to Chloe's equipment, or more accurately, my equipment through Chloe, because he knew what I did for work and what kind of access I'd have. How much are we talking in damages? Cybercrime Unit is still cataloging everything, but preliminary estimates put it north of $100,000, maybe more depending on what the victim companies report. He's been at this for at least 2 years based on the file dates. $100,000? The number was so absurd, it almost didn't feel real. This wasn't some guy who made a mistake. This was a career criminal who'd just been using my wife as a gateway to more valuable targets. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now he gets arrested. We've already got enough for multiple felony charges. Theft, corporate espionage, fraud, computer crimes, the whole buffet of bad decisions. The IRS is having a field day because apparently he wasn't reporting income from selling this stuff. They're hitting him with tax evasion on top of everything else." I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. It probably made me look unhinged, sitting alone in my kitchen, grinning like a maniac, but I didn't care. So he's looking at serious time. Oh yeah, with this many charges and this much documented evidence, he's looking at years, not months. Plus significant fines. The IRS alone is probably going to bury him. And that's before the companies he stole from file civil suits, which they absolutely will. What about my laptop? When can I get it back? Forensics needs to image the drive first, document what he accessed, whether he copied anything. Probably about 2 weeks, maybe 3. But I can tell you now, your encryption held up. He never got past your login screen. BIOS password laughed in his face. According to the tech guys, whatever security you had set up, it worked. That was perhaps the most satisfying thing I'd heard in weeks. All those security protocols, all that paranoid setup, all the layers of protection I'd built in, they'd done exactly what they were supposed to do. David had gotten his hands on my laptop and accomplished exactly nothing, except adding more charges to his growing list of felonies. "So, he stole my laptop and couldn't even use it," I said. And the irony was delicious. "Pretty much. Which probably explains why it was hidden in his closet instead of sitting on his desk. He'd given up on cracking it, but couldn't exactly return it after your wife started asking questions." Detective Ramos chuckled. "Guy's not as smart as he thinks he is. Clearly. Is there anything else I need to do on my end? Just keep documentation of any communications, any financial impact this had on you or your company. You might be called as a witness when this goes to trial, but that's way down the line.
For now, just sit tight and let us do our job." We wrapped up the call with promises to stay in touch, and I sat there in my kitchen staring at nothing, my mind racing through everything that had just been confirmed. David wasn't a friend going through hard times. He was a predator who'd systematically targeted people for corporate information, and Chloe had handed him exactly what he wanted on a silver platter. I thought about calling her, telling her the truth about her friend, but decided against it. She'd find out soon enough. This would hit the news eventually. Corporate espionage cases always did. And when it did, when she saw David's mugshot and read about the charges and realized what he'd actually been doing, she'd have to face what her judgment had almost cost me. I got up, poured myself some coffee, and went back to my Zoom meeting just as accounting guy was wrapping up his presentation. Everyone was clapping politely on screen. I unmuted and added my own applause, feeling better than I had in weeks. My laptop was safe, my security had held, and David the X was going to prison. Sometimes the universe really does deliver. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone absolutely losing its mind. Not just one notification, not even a few. We're talking a full-scale assault of buzzes, pings, and vibrations that made my nightstand sound like it was having a seizure. I grabbed it with one eye still closed, squinting at the screen in the early morning light filtering through the curtains. 17 missed calls from Chloe, 23 text messages, and it was only 7 a.m.
This was going to be good. I made coffee first because I'm not a monster, and there's no way I was dealing with whatever hurricane was about to hit without caffeine in my system. While the coffee maker did its thing, that beautiful gurgling sound that signals the start of consciousness, I scrolled through the messages. They started relatively calm and progressively devolved into full caps lock chaos. The first one, sent at 6:47 a.m., "We need to talk." Okay, ominous but controlled. Classic, I'm trying to be mature about this energy. By message 5, "Call me now." Getting warmer. Message 12, "I can't believe this." And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Houston, we have reached peak fury. The most recent one, sent approximately 3 minutes ago, "What did you do?" I took a long, satisfying sip of my coffee, black, no sugar, because I needed to taste the bitterness to match the moment, and typed back a response with all the emotional investment of someone ordering a pizza. Filed a report and waited. I hit send and watched the 3 dots appear almost instantly. She was typing, probably furiously, probably with autocorrect fighting for its life, trying to make sense of whatever rage-fueled sentences she was constructing. The response came through in seconds. "He's being fined $100,000. His assets are being seized. The police arrested him yesterday. He lost everything." I reread that message a few times, letting each exclamation point sink in like a perfectly aged wine. $100,000 in fines, arrested, assets seized, everything gone. It was like Christmas morning, except instead of presents, I got validation and karma delivered in a neat legal package. I typed back, "Then maybe he'll learn to borrow responsibly." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared about 6 times. I could practically hear her screaming through the phone. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and waited. This was entertainment now. This was watching someone realize that their version of reality had been completely, utterly wrong, and there was no way to spin it that didn't make them look foolish. When her response finally came through, it was a wall of text. 3 paragraphs of run-on sentences about how I was heartless, cruel, vindictive, and basically every negative adjective she could think of. She called me calculating, cold, and compared me to some villain from a movie I'd never seen. She said I destroyed an innocent man's life over a misunderstanding. She said she couldn't believe she'd wasted years of her life with someone capable of such cruelty. It was actually impressive in its thoroughness. She'd really committed to the narrative that I was the villain here, not David, the actual criminal who'd been running a corporate espionage ring.
Not her for giving away property that wasn't hers to give. Me, the guy who filed a police report about his stolen laptop. I let her finish her rant, let her get it all out. Then I crafted my response with the precision of a surgeon and the pettiness of someone who'd been proven absolutely, categorically right about everything. At least I didn't lose your boyfriend's laptop. I hit send and immediately blocked her number. Not because I'm immature. Okay, maybe a little because I'm immature, but mostly because there was nothing left to say. We were done. This conversation was done. This marriage was done. And I wasn't about to spend the next week being a verbal punching bag for someone who refused to acknowledge reality. My phone immediately started ringing from her sister's number. Blocked. Then from a number I didn't recognize, probably her friend's phone. Blocked. She was persistent, I'd give her that. But I'd spent enough years in IT to know that the best firewall is the one that doesn't engage with the threat at all. I took my coffee to the living room and turned on the news, half expecting to see something about David's arrest. It was too soon for that. Local news didn't move that fast, but I could dream. Instead, I got the usual morning show banter about weather and traffic and some celebrity drama that I immediately forgot. My work phone buzzed. My boss, Richard, calling at 7:30 in the morning. That was either very good or very bad. And given the week I'd had, it could honestly go either way. Morning, Richard.
Morning. Got your email update about the laptop situation. He sounded tired, like he'd been up for hours already. Just got off the phone with our legal team and the detective handling your case. Here it comes. Either I was getting commended or fired. No middle ground here. The encryption held, I said, because I needed him to know that first. He never accessed anything. BIOS password, drive encryption, everything worked exactly as designed. Yeah, they told me. Also told me this guy's been running a corporate espionage operation for 2 years. You basically helped bust a major case by filing that report. He paused, and I could hear him taking a sip of something, probably his usual morning energy drink that had enough caffeine to kill a small horse. Legal wants to thank you. Actually said your documentation and quick response prevented what could have been a major breach. Relief washed over me so intensely I had to sit down. So I'm not fired? He laughed. Actually laughed. Fired? You kidding? You're getting a bonus for this. Loss prevention, security protocol effectiveness, quick incident response. You basically wrote the textbook example of how to handle this situation. Plus, the company gets to use this as a case study for our security training. A bonus. I was getting a bonus for having my laptop stolen by my wife's criminal ex-boyfriend and then handling it like a reasonable adult instead of a raging psychopath. The universe really was paying dividends this week. The detective said you'll get the laptop back in a couple weeks after forensics finishes, Richard continued. We're issuing you a replacement in the meantime. Should arrive today. And hey, take Friday off. Paid. You've earned it. We wrapped up the call with him praising my level-headed crisis management and me trying not to laugh at how absolutely bizarre this entire situation had become. I'd gone from potential career disaster to employee of the month in the span of a week. My personal phone, still blowing up with blocked calls that were probably Chloe trying to reach me from every phone in a 10-mile radius, finally went quiet around 9 a.m. Either she'd given up or she'd run out of people willing to lend her their phones. Either way, I was grateful for the silence. I spent the rest of the morning catching up on work, responding to emails, and generally pretending like my personal life hadn't just imploded in the most spectacularly vindicated way possible. Around noon, my doorbell rang, FedEx guy with a package, my replacement laptop, courtesy of a company that apparently appreciated employees who didn't panic when things went sideways. I set it up at my desk, went through all the security protocols, and felt a strange sense of normalcy settling back into my life. This was good. This was fine. This was moving forward. My blocked calls list had grown to include 7 different numbers by the time evening rolled around.
Chloe was nothing if not determined. Part of me, a very small, probably stupid part, wondered what she was saying in all those blocked voicemails. Was she apologizing? Doubling down on her anger? Begging me to help David somehow? I deleted them all without listening. Whatever she had to say, I didn't need to hear it. The story was over. The ending was written. David was facing federal charges. My laptop was safe. My job was secure. And my marriage was dead. 3 out of 4 wasn't bad. That evening, I ordered Thai food, the good stuff from that place across town that always got the spice level right, and ate it while watching a documentary about space exploration. Something about black holes and the vastness of the universe. It put everything in perspective. In the grand scheme of cosmic events, my divorce was barely a blip, a tiny, insignificant moment in an endless expanse of time and space. But for me, it was everything. It was freedom. It was validation. It was proof that sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing actually works out. My phone stayed quiet for the rest of the night. No more blocked calls, no more frantic messages, just peaceful, blessed silence. I fell asleep on the couch with the documentary still playing, feeling more relaxed than I had in months. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out the logistics of separation, divorce, all that fun legal stuff. But tonight, I was just a guy who'd gotten his laptop back and his life back in one fell swoop. And somewhere across town, David was probably sitting in a cell, wondering how a simple laptop theft had turned into federal charges and a $100,000 fine. Shoulda just bought your own laptop, buddy. Shoulda just bought your own damn laptop. A week later, Detective Ramos called one final time to tell me my laptop was ready for pickup. The forensics team had finished their analysis, documented everything they needed for the prosecution, and I was clear to reclaim my property. I drove to the police station with the kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing you're about to close a chapter that had been way more dramatic than it needed to be. The laptop was returned in an evidence bag, which felt weirdly official and kinda cool in a I'm living in a crime procedural sort of way. Detective Ramos walked me through the forensics report. David had tried approximately 47 different password combinations before giving up, which made me feel vindicated about my paranoid security setup. The BIOS password had been his Waterloo. He'd never gotten past it, never accessed a single file, never compromised a single piece of data. "Your security protocol is ironclad," Ramos said, handing me the bag. "Tech guys were actually impressed. Said most corporate laptops aren't set up this well." "Paranoia is a survival skill in my line of work," I replied, signing the release form with a flourish that definitely wasn't necessary, but felt appropriate. "Worked out for you. He's going away for a while. Trial set for next spring, but with the evidence we have, his lawyers are already talking plea deal." Ramos leaned back in his chair, that same tired but satisfied expression I'd come to recognize. "You did good. Handled this exactly right." I left the station with my laptop, feeling like I'd just completed a quest in a video game and collected the final achievement. Everything was wrapped up. Everything was resolved. Time to move on. Except life isn't actually that clean, is it? Chloe moved out officially about 3 days after I blocked her number. I came home from work one day to find half the furniture gone, her clothes cleared from the closet, and a sticky note on the kitchen counter that said, "I hope you're happy." I was, actually, not in a vindictive, ha-ha, I won kind of way, but in a genuine, this relationship was toxic and I'm glad it's over kind of way. She'd taken the couch, the uncomfortable one we'd bought at IKEA, and spent 6 hours arguing about how to assemble, and left me the good recliner. She'd taken most of the kitchen gadgets we never used, the decorative pillows that served no purpose, and about 70% of the artwork that I'd never liked anyway. She left me the TV, the coffee maker, and my dignity. Fair trade, honestly. The divorce paperwork came 2 weeks later. Her lawyer had drawn it up with surprising speed, probably because Chloe wanted this over with as quickly as possible. No kids, no shared property worth fighting over. Just a clean break and mutual agreement that we'd made a mistake. I signed everything without contest, sent it back, and that was that. 6 years of marriage reduced to a stack of legal documents and a filing fee. I found a new apartment about a month after she left. Nothing fancy, a 2-bedroom in a complex that had a gym I'd probably never use, and a pool that looked great in the listing photos. It was smaller than the house, but it was mine. No shared memories, no arguments echoing in the walls, no reminders of bad decisions. Just clean slate and fresh start energy. Moving day was weirdly therapeutic. I packed up what was left, which wasn't much after Chloe's exodus, and loaded it into a rental truck with the help of Mark, my cop buddy, who showed up with beer and unsolicited relationship advice. "You dodged a bullet, man," he said, hauling a box labeled kitchen stuff that was mostly just coffee mugs and takeout menus. "Anyone who gives away your work laptop to their ex is not operating with a full deck." "Understatement of the century," I replied, carrying my desktop computer with the care of someone transporting a small child. "But hey, at least I got a good story out of it." "Good story, dude. This is legendary. You're going to be telling this at parties for years." He wasn't wrong. The story had already made the rounds at work, carefully edited to remove the parts that made me look petty and emphasize the parts where I was a security-conscious hero. My coworkers thought it was hilarious. My boss used it as a training example. I'd achieved minor celebrity status as the guy who accidentally busted a corporate espionage ring by filing a theft report. The new apartment slowly came together. I bought a new couch, a comfortable one this time, no arguments required, and set up my home office in the second bedroom. Hung up some artwork that I actually liked, organized my kitchen in a way that made sense to me instead of whatever system Chloe had insisted on, made the space mine. It was peaceful, quiet, exactly what I needed. About 2 months after the move, I ran into Chloe at a grocery store. Pure coincidence. Different store than my usual, different part of town. Just one of those weird universe moments where paths cross when you least expect it. She was in the produce section, which felt like poetic justice, given that's where I'd been when Detective Ramos first called with news about David. She saw me first. I watched her face cycle through about 6 different emotions in 3 seconds. Surprise, anger, sadness, something that might have been regret, then settling on careful neutrality. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied, because apparently we were doing this. Awkward silence. She was holding a bag of apples. I was holding a basket with beer and frozen pizza. We were living very different lives now, clearly. "I heard about David," she said finally. "The trial, the charges." "Yeah," I said, because what else was there to say? Turned out he was worse than anyone thought. She looked down at her apples like they held the secrets of the universe. "I didn't know. I really didn't know what he was doing. I thought I was helping a friend." "I know you didn't know," I said, "but that's kind of the problem, isn't it? You didn't ask. You just assumed it would be fine." She nodded. "I heard you got promoted. Congratulations." News traveled fast. Apparently, I had gotten promoted. Senior security analyst. Nice raise. Corner office that wasn't actually a corner, but had a window, which was basically the same thing. "Thanks. How are you doing?" "I'm okay. Living with my sister still, working on finding my own place." She shifted her weight from foot to foot, uncomfortable. "I heard David's taking a plea deal. Probably going to serve for years." "For years? For 4 years of crimes? I guess that tracked. Good. Maybe he'll come out of it a better person." "Maybe." She looked up at me finally, and I saw something I hadn't seen in months, actual acknowledgement of reality. "I'm sorry for what I did, for not listening to you, for choosing to defend him instead of believing you. You were right about everything." It was the apology I'd wanted weeks ago, but now it just felt hollow. Too late, too little, like trying to unring a bell that had been ringing for months. "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it. "But we're past apologies now. What's done is done." "Yeah," she agreed. "I guess it is." We stood there for another awkward moment. 2 people who used to share a life, now sharing nothing but a chance encounter in a grocery store. Then she smiled, sad but genuine. Take care of yourself. You too. She walked away with her apples, and I went back to my shopping, feeling oddly at peace. No anger, no resentment, just acceptance. We'd both made our choices. We were both living with them. And honestly, I was living pretty well. I finished my shopping, drove back to my apartment, and spent the evening setting up a new security system because old habits die hard and paranoia had served me well. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark asking if I wanted to grab drinks this weekend. I replied yes. Life was good. Different, but good. And whenever someone at work or a party or just random conversation asked about my divorce, I had my go-to line ready. My wife's ex borrowed my laptop. Now he owes the government $100,000 and is serving 4 years. Guess who didn't freak out? It got laughs every time. But more than that, it got nods of approval, impressed whistles, and requests to hear the full story. So I tell it. Carefully edited, appropriately embellished, always ending with the same moral. Trust your instincts, document everything, and never, ever loan out your work laptop, especially not to your spouse's ex-boyfriend. Especially not that. I'd restarted my life. Rebooted, refreshed, running on a new operating system that didn't include drama or people who made catastrophically bad decisions. Version 2.0 of me was bug-free, optimized, and significantly more selective about who got access to my stuff. And honestly, that was the best upgrade I could have asked for.